The occasion of this book is somewhat fortuitous, though the research has been going on for more than 10 years, and two other books are being written. So this kind of, which have not been finished. It's kind of interesting how this happened. It was because I was asked to give the Sydney State Library lectures in Australia, which in philosophy of society, which were public lectures and very much a public event, including the fact that they were broadcast by the radio and they were open to the public. And I was invited to respond to questions from people, which were quite interesting, and sometimes things like. With the kinds of things you say, how can I live my life? That's kinds of questions. In any case, the rubric in the publication of the series of these lectures is called "Thinking Out Loud," which is something that I actually took very seriously as an impetus for a different kind of writing. Really, in some ways, disengaging to some extent, as much as is possible, from the scholarly apparatus or from the demands of the scholarly apparatus. Very hard to do, I must say. And this is why in the preface to the book, I went back with great pleasure, because it had been a really long time. Went back to Roland Barthes' leçon, his inaugural lecture at the Collège de France, and where I had forgotten this, he talks very specifically of dreaming one's research out loud, and that being the kind of responsibility or occasion of the public lecture. So, in this respect, the collection of pieces, because it's not just the lectures, I added a few essays, were also essays of this kind of writing or this kind of performance in public, in a kind of public exchange, whether in blogging or in sort of agonistic exchanges, which is what lends the book, I think, occasionally a certain polemical tone. Now, the project, I've been thinking about this issue of the secular for a long time and been involved in it for a long time. As I said, the books that I've been writing are yet to come to conclusion. This was also, as a result, a great opportunity for me to look at these debates in the context of these debates. They're more than 10 years old now. Retrospectively, even though still from a kind of internal perspective. I had been, some friends, and we've been talking about this, so we've been struck by the fact that there's a certain kind of disciplinary bias in these debates, or a certain kind of tendency in one direction. My friend Amir Mufti has called it a tendency towards a certain kind of ethnographic philanthropy. That's his phrase. I'm not going to analyze the Greek choice of words here. But really, the debate is in some ways dominated by a certain kind of, roughly speaking, pardon me the kind of simplicity, a certain kind of social science or a kind of sociological culturalist bias. And as a result, unwittingly, I think, not by any kind of design, falling or not being able to overcome the epistemological framework of identity politics, in some ways continuing it, though not in that specific language, and therefore also having a difficult time unhinging itself from a certain kind of liberal politics, which was increasingly a concern of mine as these debates about something that is so immediate and real in terms of the real world were increasingly more and more scholarly matters that were being discussed as just scholarly matters. So this, on the basis of this, we can say that I tried something here that is very much part of my background, and which is why this book works very well in this context, to bring, and especially since I choose as the key term the term secular criticism, which is, as you know, a term created by Edward Said a very long time ago, and not very well elaborated by him. as a result of this retrospective in this context, I really became more aware of the necessity, or let's say, yes, the necessity to think of the secular and the secularism debates from a kind of, let's say, literary studies perspective, or a comparative literature perspective, or a literary theory perspective. We would say, if you don't mind, I'm going to hold these three terms in juxtaposition. Especially since, after all, secular criticism itself, the term emerges from that field in another era, no doubt. So I was trying to, especially in the first a couple of chapters, specifically, there is a certain epistemological concern, a certain pressure that I feel to try to reconfigure these debates about what is secular and what secularism is about from this other perspective. I'm talking, by the way, all of this is within a U.S. I should say a U.S. academy perspective, not generally speaking. So the idea then would be that the secular is really not opposed to the religious, or certainly that's the whole point is to disengage this kind of mutual determination. And to argue instead that the secular might be rather the domain of a kind of worldly, resistance to all modes of transcendental or heteronymous being, which would include, and that's the point here, certain secularist tendencies, right? This then, keeping in mind that I'm talking within a kind of, as I said, a literary studies mode, led me to accentuate what I think is an important element of the secular, the element of poiesis. In a, obviously, I'm speaking now not about texts, but in a much broader sense of the term. The kind of radical creative capacity of humanity or of societies to alter itself, to alter their conditions, to create conditions, let's say, of autonomy as opposed to the heteronomy that works upon it. So the elaboration of what is poetic in this debate, which had been actually absent, led me to, I think, displace the way that the debate has been so far conducted, for better or worse. The other aspect, which I think is very, very big, and again, I didn't anticipate it, but in retrospect, it seems to make total sense, is I've been, in this time that I've been writing about these things, I've also been concerned in writing about problems of democracy and problems of the human, in oftentimes in sort of overt political theory mode, and also in terms of journalism, as I think was said earlier. I felt that the secularism debate fails if it remains entirely a scholarly issue. If it doesn't engage in a direct sense with a political space within which it takes place, and for me, from my standpoint, remember, I'm disengaging the secular from the religious and so on, the way I defined it. The problem of what could be understood as the radical democratic space. What would be the kind of the space of radical democratic politics today? That question, and how might this inform the discussion of what is secular, or what might be the secular domain, apart from the institutional givens of what is secular, the laws, the secularist elements. So. Again, I'm invoking a kind of issue of sort of timeliness, I guess, of the world around me, given the fact that in the last, since at least 2008, it could be earlier maybe, but I would date it then, and with the banking collapse and so on. There seems to be a entirely heterogeneous and broad political movement, radical democratic movement, and sort of what we call an assembly movement. This became also my concern, so that in fact, both theoretically but also practically, the secular in the remaining half of the book enters into a discussion of what might be the radical democratic space, perhaps the radical poiesis in the streets instead of texts.